Hi, everybody. This is Sean Best, and with me I've got Bennett Kelly, Stanley Paul, and Wayne Harris. We're all Canadians, Black professionals, but we're spread all over the continent. I guess from the four of us, I'm the only one in the U.S. right now. But Wayne, you're in Toronto. Stanley, you're also in Toronto, and I believe Bennett, you're in Montreal. Wayne, you're in Montreal?
No, Stanley's in Ottawa.
Stanley's Ottawa. Okay. All right. Right across from Quebec to Ontario. So we talked a little bit about what discussion topics we need to talk about with Black professionals, and particularly from Canada, so we have a Canadian perspective. And we landed on the topic of political correctness and the U.S. election. It's a very hot topic. It's a very divisive topic, and I'm sure we'll have some very interesting points of view on this Google Hangout. For those of you who are watching, if you want to text any comments or questions, feel free to do so. I'll keep my eyes open for any messages, and we'll try to respond where possible. But for the time being, I'll hang out. For those of you, so I think I have two things open here. Sorry, guys. You're watching. Hang on. Text any. This is comments or questions. I gotta make this stop. Sorry, guys. Two things running at once here. Sorry. Yes. So let me just go on the table really quickly and have everybody introduce themselves. Let me start with Bennett. Want to say a little bit about yourself and where you're from, and tell us a bit about yourself.
My name is Bennett Kelly. Been living in Montreal most of my life. Wasn't born here though. Presently working a couple jobs. I have my own IT company for the last 12 years. Working with small Soho shops and individuals. That's pretty much it. Try to keep myself really busy. Love to travel, although I don't travel enough. I see Stanley's traveled a lot more than me, and really want to aspire to that because it really opening up your mind when you do that. So just here, gonna put my input and have a good time doing it.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us, Stanley.
Still getting a little bit of feedback here again. Damn. Okay. Yeah, my name is Stanley Paul. I'm presently living in Ottawa. Grew up in Montreal. Originally from Trinidad and Trinidad and Tobago. Currently working in really the high tech in satellite communications as a program manager. Travel quite a bit. Love traveling quite a bit. And this type of forum is the type of thing I've been looking for quite some time.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear.
And thoughts of some other Black professionals around the area.
Exactly. It's good to hear a different perspective than what you hear on CNN.
Most definitely.
All righty. Mr. Harris, if anybody doesn't know Wayne Harris, you haven't left your house because Wayne knows everybody.
I might know a few people. Wayne Harris, based in Toronto, Ontario, originally from Montreal, Quebec. Been down here about 26 years. I'm in IT, cybersecurity, and governance. I've been doing that for about 19 years, and definitely have my hooks into the Black community and trying to see what I can do to get more people to look at science, technology, engineering, and math, and all the opportunities that are available to us, and the upside for opportunities within that industry. So anything I can do to help our community get engaged and win, I'm all about.
Awesome. And my name is Sean Best. I'm also born and raised in Montreal. We all grew up in the same general area. I know a couple of you guys from growing up as 30 some odd years ago. So it's good to see you guys again and reconnect. And you guys haven't aged much. Well, Wayne, you did age, but the rest of you guys didn't age much.
Yeah, we're gonna edit that.
We're gonna cut the part about the live broadcast. Yeah, I also work in IT. I've been a project manager, program manager for 23 years. I was a consultant for 10 of those years. My experience is mostly in financial services, although I've worked in many different industries in Canada and now in the U.S. Both telecommunications, cable. I worked for a number of financial institutions in Canada, and I've also worked for some payment processors in the U.S. And now I work in supply chain management, but all technology-based. And so I think we all have some very similar and interesting perspectives. So let's get on to the topic at hand. And I'm going to put it out there because I'm sure there are thoughts floating out there about what you'd like to talk about. And I have a certain perspective. I live now, and I've been living here in the United States in Atlanta, Georgia for the last 6.5 years. For those of you who may not be aware or live under a rock, Georgia is a red state, 51% Republican vote in the last election. So I hear, see, and am exposed to different perspectives, and what I'll try to do is to, making my best effort to try to represent some of that in this conversation to keep it balanced and make it interesting. So let me see. Wayne, I'll go over to you for your thoughts on what are your thoughts about the impact of political correctness on the U.S. election, or do you think there was any impact at all?
Okay, that's the question we're all here to discuss. I think that question is best answered based on the outlet of the media that you're speaking about. So if you want to contrast Fox News with CNN, then there was much more political correctness on the CNN side than there was on the Fox side. Fox News is very blatantly right-winged, whereas CNN is blatantly left-winged, but Fox News doesn't seem to express themselves with the same level of reserve as you find on CNN. CNN, you can almost see them picking and choosing their words, whereas Fox News seems to have less of a filter as it relates to much of the political correctness that's out there.
And I would say that for the most part, I agree with that statement. Fox News is, they tend to be, to your point, a little less reserved in expressing their opinion. CNN, I don't know if I would say reserved, but they have a different way of couching their perspectives, and a lot of it really is in the questions that they ask and the way in which they ask those questions. Now, in all fairness, I don't know if there's any major media outlet that doesn't have a leaning to some degree. MSNBC leans left, Fox leans right, CNN is sort of center left, with some shavings of right depending on who asks the questions, and they try to sort of appear to be balanced. I have my points of view on both of them, but yeah, for the most part, I think you're right. I think you've hit it on the head. CNN tries to appear to be balanced, leaning left.
Yep.
Bennett, where does MSNBC come into the mix, do you guys feel?
Yep.
Between the two?
Between the two, you tend to think MSNBC is more centrist and CNN?
Actually, they might be more left than CNN.
I agree.
If you think about it.
Yeah.
I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So CNN in the middle, Fox to the right, MSNBC to the left.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
If I can add something, I know we're talking about discussing the leanings of all these networks. I think what's more telling is not the questions they ask, but the questions that they don't ask. And in that regard, I think CNN fails big time. There's a gentleman on CNN by the name of Andrew Cuomo. Is that his name? I can't remember exactly.
Chris
Cuomo, sorry. And he's one of the few reporters on CNN that actually asks what I would call, quote unquote, relevant questions.
Yeah.
It seems that a lot of the questions, for example, Anderson Cooper is just, forget it. He's just not someone I want to listen to anymore. I think they're so polite, they just don't ask the relevant questions, And another thing that I despise about CNN is the repetitiveness of their broadcast.
Yes.
They're doing it over and over again. They have 24 hours a day to dig deep, and they don't.
They don't.
They don't.
I would have to agree with that. Chris Cuomo is, to your point, Ben, he's probably the only person I could think of on CNN. I watch CNN quite a bit. I mean, I live in center. Yeah, I live, where CNN's located in Atlanta. And when he's interviewing somebody, a Democrat, he asks some fairly hard questions that would typically come from a Republican. And then vice versa. When he's talking to a Republican, he kind of plays the other side of the fence, and he plays devil's advocate, which makes the broadcasts with him interesting. But I find, for example, like the Anderson Coopers of the world, or I'm trying to think of some of the other characters on the broadcast. I find they ask a question, and if you're answering the question in a way that lends credibility to the opposing point of view, they'll kind of roll their eyes back and they'll change the subject, or they'll try to ask the question in a different way to try to get you to answer in the way that they want you to answer, to expose what your position might be. They don't tend to find, and I really have an example to point to. I'm afraid I don't have one, but I watch CNN every day, driving into work. I listen to it, and there's a certain answer that they want to hear. And when we talk about political correctness, what I found a lot, except for, notwithstanding Chris Cuomo, a lot of the questions were really phrased around supporting the narrative that supported Hillary Clinton. And if you had any sort of point of view that didn't score points for Hillary, or didn't sort of put her in a positive light, my perspective has been that they tend to change a question, change a topic, or cut you off in the middle of what you're saying, because they don't want it to go too far in that direction. Anybody have an opposing point of view to that?
I find media today all around, regardless on which side, are all at fault, because nobody's asking pertinent and direct questions to get answers. As you said, they lead a narrative. They have a certain slant, and all they're questioning you down that slant. And as you just finished saying, if you give an opposing answer, response, but it's not going in the direction they want, they do cut you off, and nothing gets accomplished. And that's what I find with the media right now, is that nothing gets accomplished. Bernie Sanders, I just saw a clip today of Bernie Sanders. He was I forget what they were talking about, sorry. And they asked him some fluff question, and Bernie Sanders right up said, the media, you guys are wrong, because you guys are not asking. They were asking him a question about in the next 4 years, is he going to run, or who does he think is going to run? And he says, what are you guys talking about? Why are you asking me about 4 years from now, when we have things directly now that needs to be answered? And none of the media is asking it.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, what does Trump do? He cuts, if you make him unhappy, he's done with you.
Right. It's funny how there's a cognitive dissonance going on. I mean, to your point, Stanley, I think media outlets have stopped practicing journalism for a long time. I mean, what we watch now it's not news, it's infotainment. It just appears to be news. And yeah, the tough questions, the questions that, quite frankly, when you look at, I don't know if you guys saw the SNL skit where they reenacted what it would be like to be sitting in the living room watching the election results pour in, and it was Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, and 3 other cast members from SNL, a white guy and 2 white girls. And they were all like, oh yeah, Hillary's going to take it, and she's doing this, she's doing great, and she's going to take this state. And they kept sort of showing hour after hour how the night goes, and the look of shock on their faces. I mean, it was being funny, but it was probably reflective of most of the United States, where people just did not see that coming. I mean, in spite of all the absolutely insane and idiotic stuff that Donald Trump said, that I mean, look, he couldn't have lowered the bar any lower than he did for Hillary to knock it out of the park. I mean, anything else he could have done besides shoot somebody on TV, live broadcast, to give her that election? There was nothing he could have done.
He said he would do that, and he would get off.
He said he could.
Exactly, and it proved that he would have gotten off.
Right.
On Fifth Avenue, yeah.
Right. Fifth Avenue, he shot somebody and lost 1 vote.
He said, "I'll still." So it doesn't matter. So I think CNN completely lost it, and no longer became news. Well, we already knew they're not news. It's more of a tabloid TV.
Yes.
When they hired people in Trump's inner circle, in particular, a disgraced campaign manager who had to leave. There aren't pundits. These are hardcore Trump supporters. No matter what he says, they're going to be on his side. So now you've completely taken away any semblance of neutrality whatsoever. When I saw that, I'm like, this is more like the Inquirer. This is not news.
Right.
If you want to see news in this day and age, I'd prefer to watch Al Jazeera or watch BBC.
Or NPR or whatever else. I mean, I think what was the most stark realization for everybody was, you hear the mantra of, for the most part, it's a left-leaning mantra. And everyone's sort of buying it, and this sounds good. This ideology is the right ideology. We're patting each other on the back. It's no microaggressions. We're all up safe spaces, trigger warnings, all that fun stuff, and we're all sitting there, congratulating each other on our magnificence and our greatness. And then come 2 o'clock in the morning on the Wednesday, the whole world discovered that Donald Trump won that election. And what they missed was that, to your point, and to all of your points, there were conversations that everybody was avoiding because they were uncomfortable conversations that they didn't want to have. That the electorate said, you know what? Okay, don't ask me, don't talk to me. I'll just vote. My vote will do all my talking. And Wednesday morning was a very sober morning. I walked into the office on Wednesday. Now, again, I live in Georgia, so there are a lot of people who were very happy when I walked into the office. They're like, "Whoo, that was close. We're so glad." They didn't really say exactly what they wanted to say, but the bottom line was, and I'm not implying that there was racism, by the way. A lot of people just do not trust Hillary. Donald Trump is brash. He's a jerk. He's a jackass. He's racist. But the one thing he isn't is he is very clear in who he is. There's no shocking surprise about who Donald Trump is. You know who he is when you see him, when you hear him. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, well, let's just say that I can't disagree with people who say that she's a wolf in sheep's clothing, because she definitely is.
She has situational character.
Yeah.
Right.
So depending on which state she's in, what the subject is, who's in the room, her opinion changes, and that's problematic.
Yes, exactly. And it changed on TV. I mean, look.
Who's lining her pocket?
Go ahead, Stan.
No, I said, don't forget who's lining her pocket. She changes about this election as being, choosing between two evils. But I mean, if I have to look at Trump, okay, what Trump stood for initially, without all the rhetoric and all the BS that was coming out of his mouth, was to take back the government, make the government try and remove the corruption, because nobody has their hands in his pocket, right? That's what he's trying to say. But the vile stuff that came out of his mouth is what just swayed and brought up the underbelly of America.
Yeah.
Now, the media, you look at Fox, they just rolled with it, put up anything about Trump. What it was, let's talk about the 36,000 emails that disappeared. That was always their comeback. They never had anything to say about the crap that was coming out of this guy's mouth. So, I mean, how could anybody, and the sad part of America, I tend to think, is people go and will only listen. So if I am right-wing, left-wing, as you guys say, I'll go to MSNBC. People are not listening to hear the differing views and then having some type of really conversations to try and see and try and understand the other person's point of view. And that's one of the major divides in America, from where I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's something called critical thinking. And critical thinking means you have to look at the situation 360 degrees and then come to your own conclusion from your own research.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's this new thing about fake news, and they're saying everything that is not a major media outlet is fake news. And everybody on this call knows that's not true. I watch the Young Turks every now and then,
Mm-hmm.
and these guys will lay it down factually and tell you what the deal is. RT, the same thing. NPR, the same thing. Al Jazeera, BBC to some extent, more so than the American mantra of whatever the sound bites are to make the most money for the advertisers that are advertising during that time. So there's an inherent conflict, and political correctness has to be there, because if I know Ford is going to be my sponsor during this show, 360 or whatever, I'm not going to throw stones at Ford. Even if their cars are blowing up on the street, I can't, because I want that $250,000 for 30 seconds, and I have to get it. So whenever you see, like during the whole election, you notice certain companies were being advertised more so than others. And it could have been drugs, big pharma, it could have been whatever. But you notice that these companies were going to town during these big, I won't even call them debates, because debates have rules, and they didn't follow any of the rules of debate that I know of. And I've been debating for a long time. But what I would like to know, Sean, because you're actually in the States, you're south of the Mason-Dixie line, right? You're literally in the red zone of what America is going to become. Not so much become, what America is going to reveal itself to be over the next 4 years. I think this is going to be the most authentic America since Jim Crow.
Yeah.
Okay? This is the America that any one of us on this call has read about, has seen movies about, has known about, but maybe haven't touched and felt in our own life personally. But I think in the next 4 years, when we come to the States, we're gonna feel the anxiety. We feel it here in Canada, so I can only imagine what you feel in the heart of the red states. So talk to me about that.
In the belly of the beast. My perspective is funny, because when I first moved down here, obviously my perspective was a lot like you guys. The majority of my experience with the United States was based on my occasional vacations there and what I watched on TV. And let's face it, I mean, you guys can attest to this, but 95% of all the TV that you watch is American TV. We watch Canadian TV to get the news and to get the weather. That's about it. Right? So let's just call it what it is. Right? So, every Canadian knows the American national anthem. Every Canadian knows at least the first few lines of the Constitution. We don't even know our own Constitution. We know theirs. So we know a lot about the United States, but the one thing, there are different. When I first moved here, I had a certain perspective of the U.S. that over the course of the last years has changed, and it changes from one state to the next. It's not, we may have a perspective in Canada, there's north and the south, but even in the south, there are nuances that are different from one state to the next. Georgia is considered more upscale, cosmopolitan than, for example, Alabama or Mississippi. North Carolina is considered a high-tech hub. South Carolina is more, they're more antebellum, plantation homes and sort of the old romantic, view of the South, and you find that there. So there are very different nuances down here. Another thing I learned too was that my perception or perspectives of the U.S. and in particular the South, when I first moved down here, was related to what I saw on TV, and most of those were black and white clips from the 60s, right? Or the Emmett Tills of the world, and those stories. So, was I a bit apprehensive when I first came down here? Yeah. They have concealed carry laws down here, which means you can walk with a gun on your hip if you have the license for it. I remember the first time I was at my buddy, we're out in the countryside, North Georgia, and we're driving down this little country road, and these little houses on the side of the road flying rebel flags. I remember saying to him, "Dude, do not break down here, man. Do not break down here." He was like, "Dude, just calm down. It's not that big of a deal." And it took me a minute to really get that, because our perception of what, for example, that flag means, or being the South is a very narrow view of what we see in the media. And I tell Americans all the time, listen, your worst enemy isn't the ISIS. It isn't the president. It isn't your legal system. Your biggest threat is your media, because that's how people view you around the world. And if you were just watching media and draw a conclusion about what this country is like based on what you see on TV, you'd be scared shitless to come here. I mean, it's a scary place. But I've had conversations and I've heard people. I remember when I first moved down here, someone said to me about Obama was just voted back in, I believe, and I was coming back into town. I was in Canada on business. I came back, and someone said to me, so, you know, what do you think about, I said I was from Canada. They said, oh, you all have that socialized healthcare in Canada. I said, yeah, well, yeah, we have Medicare. We have you know, it's universal healthcare. So what do you think about that? And of course, what they're waiting to hear me say is something that would equate to, you know, supporting Obamacare, right? And I didn't feel one way or the other about it because, quite frankly, you know, I work for a company. If you work for a company, you've got insurance coverage. But I said to them, look, I can't vote in your country. I don't have, you know, I'm not a citizen here. So I'll give you my perspective as a Canadian. I know the United States is the only country in the industrialized world that does not have medical insurance or universal health care. And here's my story. I have 2 children. Both are born in Canada. The total bill to me that I had to pay out of pocket for the 2 of them combined was $45. And they look at me like, really? Here's my story. That's my point of view. Right? Right or wrong, it is what it is. That's what I paid out of pocket. So, but going back to the whole political correctness, you know, racism is I think it's a part. It's not all the answer to why people have an issue with political correctness. If you watch CNN very carefully, you'll notice that, and you guys have heard this talk, YouTube, on TV, and you watch The View, you watch you know, any of these TV shows, you watch what's that woman's name on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow. You know, there's certain topics when you begin to speak in a very plain and way that does not fit the let's just call it narrative. The more feminized narrative. People's backs get up, they start giving that look. Then, you know, they either begin to cry bully you, they begin to shame you, begin to make you feel awkward, they change a topic, or they'll throw out a name like misogynist right away because you call somebody that name and they start to backpedal. And so when you take those little, for lack of better terminology, and I'm using this phrase in jest, microaggressions, and you beat people back with that, preventing them from saying what they need to say, if they may not be articulate enough to say it in the way that you might like it, resentment builds, and you take that resentment day after day, year after year, month after month, year after year. They begin to realize and think, you know what, nobody cares what I have to say, and screw you. So when they do vote, surprise, they voted for Trump, and it has less to do with being racist or wanting to make America great like the 50s again, and having us walk around with the sign saying I am a man. A lot of it really is I've been shamed and bullied and been basically told I don't want to hear what you have to say, and if you do open your mouth, I'll embarrass you. There's doxing scenarios where people get doxed and they lose their jobs because someone had an opinion that it was contravened the public narrative. So that went on for a lot of the last 8 years, particularly the last 3 or 4 years. It's been really bad here, and I hear it down here in the South. I mean, I have very good friends of mine who are they're Southerners, born and raised, own 40 guns, the whole bit, the type of thing that every Canadian would say, oh my God, that guy sounds scary. The nicest guys you could ever meet, nicer than some of the people I've met in Canada. So I've seen a different side of the people in the South than what you may see on TV. I know it's a long answer, guys, so it's a very short question, but that was my answer.
Listen, we know that 65% of the uneducated white men voted for Donald Trump. And one of the reasons they did that was they felt their voices, their livelihoods, what their fathers and grandfathers told them was their lifestyle, they could not repeat under the current regime. And Hillary represented more of that current regime. So they said, hey, I'm voting for the lifestyle my grandfather, great-grandfather had, and I want that back. And Trump is saying exactly what I want to hear. And again, I don't have 360-degree critical thinking, so I'm hearing the sound bites that make sense to me. It's in my self-interest to vote for Trump, and I did so, not because I'm a racist, but because I want what I believe is my birthright. And Trump is going to put me in position to get that back. Voting for anybody other than him wouldn't make any logical sense to somebody who's thinking linearly along those lines. So I get why they did what they did. Plus, they want to be able to stick it to the man, and Hillary represents the man. Remember, if you're in the South, you lost the Civil War. The North has run things for the last, 100 years, other than when you have Southern presidents. So who was the last Southern president? LBJ?
No, Jimmy
Carter. Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter.
From Georgia, who came in just before Reagan. And they did to him what they did to Obama. Basically neutralized him, and he was a one-term president, and it was done. But he was trying to do real things, just as Bernie Sanders was trying to do real things. And every time Bernie Sanders said, what about the water in Flint? What about the schools? What about the infrastructure? What about universal health care? People said, you're a socialist, you're a kook, you're a communist, get rid of you. We want to talk about building walls. We want to talk about, not allow Muslims into the United States. We want to talk about those things because they're sensational, and they sell advertising, and they get eyeballs onto our channel. So one of the things I learned many years ago at Dawson was about bias. And everybody has their own bias. But it was a teacher in high school who told me, racism is not just bias. We all have our own bias. Every one of us shaves our head. We have a bias for low hair. All right? Doesn't mean we're racist against people who have hair. It just means that we have a bias to having low or no hair. Bias plus power equals racism. So when people say it's reverse racism because whites are being marginalized, it's reverse racism, you can't use that word because I can't remember the comedian's name, but he was the guy who wrote for Richard Pryor. He always wears a hat.
That's Paul Mooney.
Paul Mooney.
Yeah.
And this guy said, I can't stop a white man from getting a job. I can't stop him from buying a house in the neighborhood. I can't stop him from buying a car or getting a certain job. So I can never be a racist because I do not have the power to impose my will on another race. So blacks can never be racist. And that's probably the best definition that I've seen. So political correctness won't allow anyone to say that on the main media. You can't say it. And people are gonna, as soon as you do it, out comes the race card. And they want to do exactly what you said, which is beat you into submission, so you never raise that topic again.
Yeah, right.
The men and the women who brought Trump to power want what they believe is theirs. And this is not white supremacy. This is white privilege. And there's a difference. All right, so Stanley, you can take it from there.
No, you're definitely correct. I understand that because I think it was you who sent me something today, but if you're born with it and you've always had it, and then you're seeing it being eroded, and soon enough, they say in the next 10 years, you're going to be a minority in America. Well, hey, yeah, let's change things now. Let's get a hold back on this. Let's get back what is owed to us. And that I believe that's really the reason why Trump got elected. But the thing that really happened was a lot of women had to vote for him too, and that for me was a surprise.
Well, those women are with their husbands. Making combined incomes of less than $60,000 a year, living in a house that costs less than $150,000 a year, driving a car that costs less than $200 a month, and that's their life. So they're going to vote for Trump because they think, again, he's the American dream, and they believe and they aspire to what he's selling. So why wouldn't they vote for him?
Exactly.
What do you think, Bennett?
Because
No, Wayne, finish, please.
no, I'm just saying that I'm not saying there's group thing, but I'm saying if you are listening to, again, there's white supremacists, there's white nationalists, there's a difference, and if you listen to your political leaning, everybody knows it's last licks for the Caucasian. They've got 20 years, and then the Latinas and the blacks outnumber them. This is it. They get 8 years of Trump if they can. Might squeeze in one more Caucasian president, but then after that, it's pretty much brown and black from that point going forward. They know this. So they have to get somebody in power, and Trump has 2 years before the midterm elections when the House and the Senate would probably go blue, and he'll have to play the bipartisan game that Obama had to play for the last 6 years of his presidency. But between now and 2018, he learned from Obama. He has to ram policy through where the wind is at his back, the House and the Senate are at his back, and he didn't have to say anything to anyone. He has a majority, and he just gets it done. So if he's building a wall, he has 24 months to do so, to get it mandated. If he's going to have a registry for Muslims, he's got 24 months. If he's going to, ask NATO to pay their fair share, he's got 24 months to do it, because when the midterm elections come and it all goes blue, he is lame duck.
Yep.
And that's the deal.
A quick poll. How many of you believe that Trump is going to be a two-term president?
Woo!
That's a good
Tough
question.
one.
You know, it's a hard. I can't say for certain that he would or he would not. I'm not playing coy or trying to play it safe, but I think Wayne, you're onto something. I think last licks is a good way of putting it. You're right. Just from a demographic perspective. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people make the assumption, and I think to a great degree, it's kind of right. It's kind of true that Black people vote Democrat, and for the most part, they do. But there is a larger and a growing population of Black people in the United States who are right of center, and there are some of those in the South. It's quite interesting, more than I would have expected. But to your point, look, if it's last licks and the last 2 years of his current term ended up being lame duck, or he's sort of mired in controversy and gridlock with the Senate and with Congress, then it could go either way. It could be, well, hey, we tried you for a little while, you didn't work out, so we're going to go back to what we know. Or it could be, hey, you know what, this is the last chance we're going to get, so we're going to put him in one more term, and then after that, it is what it is, right?
Well,
so here's what I've learned. Go ahead, Bennett.
Well, let me put it to you like this. If he follows his present trajectory, I don't think he's going to last even 4 years. He's already, remember, he's a businessman. He's not a politician. And he has already said, parts of Obamacare look like they'll stay. He's already softened his position on the wall, per se. Yeah, they might build the wall, but he's more for immigration reform, because when he sits down, he's looking at things like a businessman. He's not looking at it like a politician with constituents, okay? Secondly, so he's actually going against the grain of his own party. Mitch McConnell has already warned him in a slight way, saying, we will oppose you even if you are our party's president if you don't do what we say. But Trump, the way he is, he's not going to do what they say, okay? He's a businessman who's also a control freak, okay? There was a little article, whenever he's building a major project, he would show up and he would basically be critical of every little thing. Why is this girder like this? Why are you guys doing this like that? Do you really think that the Republican Party, who, by the way, did not get him elected, are going to control him? And so we'll see. Let me put a little thing about the political correctness thing. He's not politically correct, but what's political correctness? Who determines what's politically correct? Okay?
The majority.
The majority, exactly. And he will soon find out that in the House, where he's at right now, in Washington, he's a minority. But you know what? He doesn't care. He really doesn't care. He's shown he doesn't care. And what I see of a danger for the Republican Party is do anything to Trump and alienate those millions of people who voted for him, because they didn't vote for the Republican Party.
Right.
They voted for Donald Trump.
That's right.
Okay. And one more thing. When we talk about political correctness and white privilege, let me take it a little bit deeper. I would say that white privilege is only an offshoot of a deeper issue, and that's fear. Somebody once told me, Ben, there's no such thing as racism. It doesn't exist. All that exists is fear. Okay? There was a gentleman with his Union Jack. He's walking around. I remember I saw this little video recently, and he was interviewed. and he was lamenting the fact that we have to get Trump in because the blacks are going to do to us what we did to them. And this really speaks volumes because they are afraid. We say there's blacks, Latinos, Asians who will take over the population or be more, the whites will become the minority. But let me put something else out there. What about all these mixed race children? Do you think they'll vote for Trump in the future? That's a very large portion of the population that's growing that we're not even taking, we're not even talking about.
Mm-hmm. Can I introduce something here? I'm going to introduce a bit of a wrinkle here. So when we talk about Southern pride and whites wanting to have their birthright and wanting to be able to benefit from the privilege that they may deem is owed to them, I'm going to take a different perspective there, because I think what happens is it's very easy to refer to white people as a monolith. They're all well-to-do, they're all making a good living, and they don't want anybody else taking their birthright from them. But the reality of it, what I see is that privileged part of society, and I live in a very affluent part of Atlanta, or a suburb of Atlanta called Johns Creek. Multi-million-dollar homes. It would be the equivalent of Hampstead to Montreal, or to what's the name of that street in Toronto?
Bridle Path, Post Road.
Bridle Path, exactly. It's very, very well to do. Celebrities live here. Athletes live here. Justin Bieber lives out. No, he doesn't live here. He lives in Buckhead. Usher lives out here. So some very, very well-to-do people live out here. But when we talk about I think when we talk about white people who, from our perspective, financially speaking, are considered to be privileged, they make a small percentage of the white population. I know a lot of people who are white men and women, born and raised here. They can trace their roots back several generations here, and they're struggling to get by. They're struggling to pay their bills. They're struggling to get insurance paid, because insurance down here isn't like it is in Canada. It's expensive down here. The relative income here, when I look at people's salaries and what people get paid down here, there is no way you could survive in Montreal or Toronto on what they make down here. It's impossible. And you have people down here, for example, it's not very uncommon to have a single income household where the wife still stays home. I don't know anybody in Toronto who does that. Everybody's wife works.
I did that.
Huh?
Sorry. I did that.
Right, but it's expensive. It's hard. It's not easy in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk, people down here watch HGTV all the time, and they see a lot of these shows where these really little houses are really expensive, and then they hear Brampton. Where's Brampton? Well, that's in Canada. Oh, are houses expensive in Canada? Yeah, they are. Wayne, looking at your house probably could sell for $750,000, maybe $800,000. Down here, what you could get for $800,000 is probably a 7,000 or 8,000 square foot house in a very, very nice neighborhood. I know. Money. I mean, So the point I'm making here basically is this: I think it's very, it's convenient to refer to the white monolith as privileged people, when in the reality, I would say that those privileged people we talk about make up maybe 1% of the white population. The rest of them, their families were working in manufacturing. Their families work in agriculture. Their families agricultural field. A lot of them come from backgrounds where they're journeymen, they're apprentices, they're doing trades, and they're just trying to feed their families. They're trying to put food on the table, just like we are. I know that from an income perspective, I make a very good living compared to many of them. So I think that my experience here has allowed me to see a different perspective there. What we see on TV, of course, all the people can afford to be on TV, or who have the kind of prestige where they'll appear on TV, but they don't represent the masses. And those people in the flyover states that voted Trump in are people who are just trying to put food on the table. So
listen, I don't begrudge them.
They're trying to feed their kids.
I don't begrudge them for that. And again, that just as you can go from NDG to Côte des Neiges to Little Burgundy to Pierrefonds or Brossard, graphic differences and shifts. And those of us who may have started in one spot and have ended up in another have figured out how to transcend those demographics. We did it through education. We did it through mentorship, some of us. We did it through different associations. And we know all the people that we needed to be around and not be around to get to where we wanted to get to, so where we can be here today. So I'm not doing the monolithic thing, but I know that there's a gentleman somewhere, and Joe, regular white guy, Caucasian, who is making, $15 an hour, has a house, a car, and living a decent life. If he were to put himself in school for 4 years, he could become your boss.
Possibly. The problem
is what I'm talking about, the privilege.
Oftentimes they can't afford it. They can't afford it. They've got kids to feed. They've got kids to put through school, to take time off, and to find out of my $15 an hour that I got to pay a crap ton of that towards insurance because it's like Canada. To be able to afford to go back to school, not going to happen.
So there's structural barriers to the 99% of whites who are not living the dream. Those same structures are there for us as well, yeah?
Yeah, well,
those people.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Stan.
I would say those people who are doing the 50, working the 9 to 5, making the $15 an hour, those are the ones who are sitting down and have a chip on their shoulder, believing that what they believe is their birthright has not been given to them because of the black and brown people. And that's what I believe Trump represents to them, is that for some reason, I think in the back of their minds, I think they believe he's going to come in, change the playing field to help lift them back up to where they're supposed to be. Because there's a lot of people sitting out there who's blaming everybody else for their circumstance or for them not being where they believe they should be.
True.
Everybody during slavery wasn't a slave master. Everybody during Jim Crow wasn't a boss. The civil rights movement wasn't being disenfranchised by the rise of the black population, the black vote, but in their mind they believe that to be true. You understand? So if your name is Bubba and you were broke and you come from a long line of broke people, talk about making America great again. Even during those days when the wind was at your back, well, we're 20 years away from being the majority. It's going to be even harder for him to get it done, and he knows that. So he is hanging on to his last option, which happened to be President-elect Donald Trump, and he's hoping that some of that goodness that he has always expected, maybe his family's always expected, and maybe has never had. It's almost like the actual American dream. He's hoping he gets a chance. He wants his shot. And I don't know if he's ever going to get it, but he believes Trump is going to get him a chance to get it. And it's our fault that he doesn't have it when that has nothing to do with reality.
Would you say... sorry, go ahead, Stanley.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
Would you say then that to a great extent, a portion of this vote would something we could label a desperation vote?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so. I agree.
Last licks. Last licks.
Wayne, with what you're saying there, the one thing that in keeping with what you're saying, but a little segue, nobody ever asked Trump what he meant by "Make America Great Again." All of us have our ideas of what we potentially think that means, but nobody in media ever asked him directly, what does that mean to make America great again?
You're right. I think somebody mentioned that, and I forget who it was. I was listening to some YouTube clip, and someone did say that nobody ever asked him what exactly does that mean to make America great again. And obviously, the first thing that you're going to assume is something bad, right? Make America great again, which means either I'm going to benefit from it being great again, or I'm going to be the one that on the other side of the fence trying to figure out why I got left behind. But Ben, I just want to go back to one thing that you mentioned, which was, I think, central to all of this, and it's it's more than I think more than just it's beyond being a black-white issue. I think it boils down to fear, and it's fear is a pervasive it's a pervasive element of life here, and it's been pervasive for many decades. And in particular, I think it's been the opportunity to reinvent the concept of fear, or to perpetuate it, started again with 9/11. And what people began to realize is fear, the amount of fear that you can manufacture directly translates to profit. And if you were to watch the news, you can watch MSNBC, you can watch CNN, you can watch Fox, you can watch any of those channels, any of those American channels, and count 10 stories in a row, any 10 stories, just pick any 10 in a row. Out of those 10, how many of them have some element of fear in it? ISIS, black on black crime, black on white crime, Black Lives Matter, cops got shot. There's always some element of negativity or fear in those broadcasts. And you'll notice that right after those broadcasts, the first commercial that you see is insurance. Now, America's the land of milk and honey. It's a land of supply and demand. Well, insurance really is money it's in case money, in case something goes wrong. So how do you create demand for insurance? And so you don't really think of insurance. I mean, that you think of stuff that's more, in front of you. Like, I got to feed the kids. I got to pay the bills. I got to make the car payment. I got to put winter tires on my car. No one wakes up in the morning thinking to themselves, hey, I think I'll buy some insurance today. Nobody ever thinks of that. But if they can manufacture fear by constantly putting it in front of you, it's funny because you don't necessarily connect the dots. It's very subconscious. You're watching the news, ISIS does this. This person's head got cut off. Accident downtown. With blah blah blah. Geico. Right? You think, oh, I should call Geico, see if I can get my car insurance lowered. It's all manufactured. Fear drives people to make decisions, and make decisions quickly. Also, when you think about the fact that there are certain civil rights that every American benefits from out of the 60s, and then when all that stuff was going on about cybersecurity, and Wayne, you can talk this better than anybody on the phone on this call can, how quickly people were willing to give up their civil rights and their privacy because they were so afraid. The fear was so palpable. They're willing to give it up. You can just go through all my phone records. You can take them. I'm not dangerous. You can search through all my stuff. They're ready and willing to give up their right to privacy because of fear. Fear gets people to do stuff really easily and very quickly.
Well, the whole military industrial complex is fueled by fear. Think about it. Fear drives people to spend money on certain things. You said insurance. Fear drives people to buy guns. Fear pushes people to donate to candidates who espouse that kind of fear and just push it out there. Fear does a lot of things. Fear makes people hate their brothers and sisters. Going back to the thing about the $15 an hour, I really wanted to put this out there because I have firsthand experience with this through my sister. My sister's lived in Houston for 19 years now, and she was looking for a house, and she makes over $125,000 a year, and she went to a broker, and then she went to a bank on her own, and we found something out. Depending on who you look like, what you look like. Okay, they choose different calculations to determine whether or not you're fit to have a loan. Okay, so that $15 American person or whatever, or white Anglo-Saxon American walks into a bank, has a much better chance of getting a loan than an African American person earning the same amount or somewhat more. And what really made this hit home was a graphic that Wayne actually posted on Facebook today. That showed salaries compared to levels of education. Okay, and I would tell you straight out that people might say, oh, that's racism. It's not. It's fear. I don't want this person who doesn't look like me to do what I can do and get the results that I can get paid what I get. I have to be on top. I was speaking to Sean recently. You can even look at it further. The map of the world. Have we all gone to Walmart and seen a globe? Okay, the globe is incorrect.
Yep.
Okay, the size of the continents are incorrect. Okay,
Yep.
And Africa can fit India, Canada, India, United States, and I forgot what other country.
China and
basically
Russia.
all of North America. If you want China and Russia in one thing, but I forgot the name of the map. It starts with an M.
Mercator.
Mercator map is another tool that people use. Okay, and I think a lot of it has to do with fear. You don't want the other person to be better than you are. Size matters, right, guys?
Great point. Listen, the bottom line here is Public Enemy named their album that in 1989.
Prophetic.
Right, and what they named their album, what the rest of the world is concerned about, because if the four of us now with the power of Google actually go and Google pre-colonial history, right, from multiple sources, not the sources they tell you, but the sources that you can go find for yourself, you're going to learn about yourself, pre-colonial self. Then you learn about the colonials and what really happened during those times between 1965 and now. You can see the patterns and you can see how to correct those patterns, which is why the education system in the United States doesn't allow for history taught pre-colonial, because it's going to instill pride. You're going to want more, and if you want more, you're going to compete. If you compete, you might win. It's a challenge.
You know, on that note, because I do have some experience with the educational system on here, because my son goes to school here. And they did do world history in 10th grade last year, and this year he's doing U.S. history. And they do touch on cultures in a much deeper fashion than you'd assume. I think the predominant assumption is that Americans don't really care what happens outside of their borders. They don't know much about it, and to a large degree, that there is some validity to that, because let's face it, if we only watch Canadian TV and didn't watch any American TV, we wouldn't know much about what happened outside of our borders either. And the news down here is very localized. People know about what's happening in their city, but they have no idea what's happening in Mississippi or Alabama. I don't hear about them in the news at all. So I mean, it's not unreasonable to expect that they don't have any idea what happens there. I want to talk about something here that we talked about a minute ago, and that is just my view of what it's like to be a black professional in Atlanta in the South, compared to being a black professional in Toronto. I didn't have much experience in Montreal because I left there quite young. I was only 21 when I left there. But the one thing I can say, and Wayne, you can keep me honest here, is I worked for at least 3 of the major banks in their downtown head office in Toronto. And I worked for Rogers as well. And I can count on one hand the number of male black professionals that I've seen. And you're one of the people, you're one of the fingers on my hand. I'm counting you. I've seen female black professionals, plenty of those. But male black professionals, I can count them on one hand and have fingers left over. And I worked there for 20 years. I've been down here for 6 years, and a plethora. And not just people in executive positions with large companies, guys who run their own companies, guys who are entrepreneurs. So, while there is the perception of imbalance, and there are a lot of disenfranchised people here, both black and white. Black take it a little bit harder. They do. They do get treated a little worse. And quite frankly, the people who get treated the worst are not black people. They're Mexicans. They get treated the worst. I've seen it. I've found instances where I was, dating somebody who was of Latin heritage, and I've noticed the service that we got was dramatically different than when I came in when I was dating the white person or was other black people. Dramatically different. So they've got it really bad. But yeah, I think the opportunities, from my perspective, from what I've seen and what I've experienced here, if you are a Black professional, is a universe away from the opportunities in places like Montreal and Toronto. That's just my perspective.
Well, having sold in Canada and having sold in the US, I can safely say that you're 100% correct on that comment. Bennett and myself moved to Atlanta next year, and our effort would be the same.
Yep.
And our lifestyle would quadruple.
Yep.
Yes.
So we understand that. I think Canada programmed many of us into thinking that we can only get what our parents got. All settle for, the jobs that they think are guaranteed because, hey, let me get into the union because if they want to cause me any problems, I've got recourse and so forth. But I don't want to be a manager because if I'm a manager, there's no union, and then I'll be at risk. So again, to your point about fear. But today in Toronto, there are so many Black male professionals in banking. They have an organization, and they meet every month, and they talk about what's going on in the industry, and they talk about how they can help each other and so forth. And it's been going on for almost 20 years. So just when you checked out, it started ramping up. So maybe you were the problem.
Maybe it was me. That's great. That guy's gone. We can start now.
But there is a rise of the white collar person of African descent in Toronto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk to me, Bennett. You talk to me in Montreal. There are those organizations in both of those cities. You can check them out, Manyatta Networks, and they have meetings in Ottawa. They have meetings in Montreal, and they have meetings here in Toronto. Nothing in the States yet, but it's about the entire diaspora. There's a connection between Canadian, West Indian, and African. And it's a beautiful thing to see and feel. It's just amazing to walk into a room where it's not all Bajans or all Trinidadians. It's Nigeria, Rwanda, Burundi, Guinea, Senegal, Ethiopia. You're like, wow. And they're speaking 2, 3, 4 languages, and they have education from around the globe, and they're doing really, really well, carrying intellectual property. So it's where it could have been 20 years ago, and it is moving forward up here. I assume you guys down there have, Black Enterprise Magazine and all the different organizations that come from that, Minority Business Association and so forth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's tons. I mean, and I know we're kind of deviating from the political correctness in the U.S. elections conversation. I think this conversation here is one that probably merits its own Google Hangout. But there's an association called TAG, which is technology. I think it's a Technology Atlanta group or something like that. It's Atlanta is the Silicon Valley of the East. There's a lot of technology companies that sprout out of Atlanta. A lot of angel and venture capitalist investment here. A lot of very, very bright people. Georgia Tech produces some of the smartest people in the country. So this is a place, if you want to really grow or an idea or a concept, this is a good place to do it. And Wayne, just on sort of supporting what you just said a minute ago, one of the other things I noticed when I moved down here is that the paradigm about, I guess, the Canadian paradigm and the U.S. paradigm are really very different. We tend to associate our points of view or our way of thinking a lot with Americans, but there's certain things where we just can't seem to align. And the American paradigm is one where the concept of being an entrepreneur, of coming up with an idea of your own, of pursuing your own dreams. In Canada, we kind of talk about it because we hear it on TV a lot. Here, it's the mantra. It's the reason people get up and get out of bed in the morning. And to sit down and have a conversation with I had this conversation with some stranger. I was telling Bennett last week at a coffee shop a week ago, and just shooting shit. He was sitting next to me on this. We shared a table because there were short tables in this restaurant, and the older white guy, and we just started talking business. And within about a minute and a half of just introducing ourselves, we started talking business. Here's an idea I've got this idea. I know this person. Like, it's the energy exists here, and the energy, it feeds on itself. It's the culture here to come up with an idea and to feed on, and to have this feed off of each other, and to look for ideas, and to pull people in, and to look for, to pull in resources and so on. My good friend, his son, who is 21 years old, just built his own mobile app called Paraperks. I was telling Bennett about this last week. This is the place where dreams happen, where people have ideas and people say, you know what, that's a great idea. How can I be a part of it? In Canada, it's like, a patent in Canada costs 20 grand. And if you ain't got 20 grand and you don't know somebody who's got that kind of money, and you don't really, really believe in your idea, so I get my 20 grand back, it's a tough one. It's a tough sell. To get a patent in the U.S., you can spend as little as $150 to get a patent. It's an environment that encourages creativity, to create jobs, to create opportunities. I mean, they invented the iPhone, they invented the internet, they invented all the stuff that we're using right now. Google is an American company, right? I mean, this is the place where this stuff, it breeds, it happens here, right? So it's a very different paradigm than where our parents grew up in Canada.
Right. So great points. America is the gold standard for frictionless business creation, right? Everybody understand, land of the free, home of the brave. So what they want you to do is the pursuit of happiness and liberty. So they're going to give you everything you can to start your own business, to create wealth for yourself, because it's about individual wealth in the United States. Collectivism is Canada. Tommy Douglas back in the day, Medicare, it's about social, it's about the government wants to be the tide that raises all ships, rather than entrepreneurship being the tide that raises all ships between the two countries. America is about, hey, you have an idea, you want to get her done, we're a get it done country. Here's all the things you need to do, and here are all the people you need to get it done. Venture capital down there flows like water. Up here, you basically have to come up with insulin to get VCs to give you money. But down there, if you have an idea and you build a business plan, even if it's not the best, but the idea has merit, there are systems in place to push you in the direction of winning, as opposed to being bogged down by all the red tape that we have up here, which our entrepreneurs, stifles our ability to create businesses, and then they tax us to oblivion as an employee and as an entrepreneur, to prevent you from not wanting to depend on the government for your well-being. And I applaud America for saying, hey, we're going to give you everything you need to start a business. If Bennett was doing what he was doing in Atlanta, he wouldn't have a full-time job, because there's 10 times the people down there. You don't have to get everybody. But if you just got the Canadian population down there, which is 10% of the population, you're a billionaire.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You understand?
Yeah, I mean, look,
there's a lot.
I presented to venture capitalists a concept that I had, and it just baffled me how quickly a concept that I had drew attention. Like, I was presenting to a larger group of people, and after I was finished presenting, the host said to me, he said, come here a second, follow me to this room. I went to this room in the back, and there was a venture capitalist and his one of his partners sitting in the room, where I then represented to them. I mean, it happened. I wasn't planning for that to occur. I figured I'll just work in my chops, figure out how to do the 30-second elevator speech. And before you know it, I'm sitting in the room with a venture capitalist who, who's willing to discuss forking over, $2.5 million. I was like, that happened fast. That would never happen in Canada that fast. There's no way. I mean, my idea wasn't patented yet, so he kind of said, okay, well, I can't hear any more about this. But if I'd have pursued that and put $150, $300, let's call it, I could have had it patented and had 3 venture capitalists or 3 angel investors interested in the idea. I don't have 20 grand in Canada to get my idea patented. I mean, I gotta feed kids. I got a mortgage to pay. Taxes are high. Who has 20 grand sitting around? It just kills that idea. It kills the energy.
So here's what we're saying. politically correct or not, my prime minister, you know, that everybody loves around the world, is a good guy. Highest tax bracket in Canada is 54%. More money home after every hour of work if you make over $150,000 a year, as if the $150,000 a year is all we want you to make before you start believing that you can be on your own without us.
Yeah.
So you can fly as high as $150,000, and then we're going to tax you back down into submission.
Yep.
In order for you to believe that you can't break out. And the people who break out, I have to give mad props to, because they are putting in work to make that money and try to keep some of it in this country. Because we have a weight of this, the education, not so much education, but the healthcare, because of the demographics, is going to be brutal over the next 25 years, and we're all going to be a part of it. Yep. Right? When I'm 75, I want my Medicare just as much as I want it now. Mm-hmm. And I've paid into it heavily. Mm-hmm. So I definitely want my MRIs and my and all the different things that are coming. But again, America is designed for the entrepreneur. You are there, we are here, but to the power of the internet and things like this, we can get stuff done cross-border.
Absolutely.
I don't have to be in Atlanta to be in business in Atlanta.
That's right.
My money has to be working for me in Atlanta, and you're on the ground. So we can, you know, these are things we can talk about down the road. But getting back to political correctness, everybody in Canada voted in our last prime minister because we wanted to change from the last guy. Who was in power was actually better for me where I am now. It wasn't better for the environment. It wasn't better for carbon taxes. It wasn't better for the poor, but it was better for me. Mm-hmm. In my demographic, it's better for me, the last guy who was in power. Yep. For you, for where you are in your demographic. You understand?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's going to help you.
Now, in a bunch of different ways. I mean, that's part of it. The other part of it's a whole other conversation. We can have another Google Hangout. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, quite frankly, when I saw that Justin Trudeau became prime minister in Canada, I was thinking, really? That guy? And when I saw the first changes he made to the cabinet, I was like, why would you make those changes? Like, what was the qualifications of those people that you brought in? And it wasn't based, from my perspective, what I understood.
50-50.
The 50-50, it had nothing to do with, can you get this job done? It had to do with satisfying an ideology. And this goes back to political correctness again. Yeah. You know, right. It's like, look, ideologies don't make they don't sell elections. I mean, Hillary Clinton had the same thing. She had this ideology that she very thinly veiled. She has an absolute hate for men. I don't know if you saw this one. It was a town hall or something like that, and one of the co-speakers was Madeleine Albright. You remember Madeleine Albright? She was the Secretary of State. Mm-hmm. I think it was the Clinton era, maybe even before that. And she stood up. You can look this up. You don't have to believe me. Look it up on YouTube. Where she stood up in front of a crowd of young women and said, Madeleine Albright said this. She says, "There is a special place in hell for women who don't support other women and vote for Hillary Clinton."
I heard that.
What? I mean, if there's anything more and infantilizing and patronizing, I can't imagine what it could possibly be. And Hillary was like this.
Being black and being told you had to vote for Obama.
Yeah. I mean,
being told you had to vote for Obama, and there's no other choice because you're black and he's black.
Right. It's, you know, it was. I mean, she used every shaming tactic in the book. She had Trump basically handing her the election. I mean, the only thing he could have done, like you said before, was shoot somebody on TV live and get caught doing it, and maybe that might have prevented him from winning. But there's nothing more that could have happened to get her in there. It's proof that kind of ideology, that's political correct ideology, that the world that she lives in is a world that is not conducive to anything progressive. It's not conducive to people getting jobs and feeding their kids and keeping a roof over their heads and paying their taxes.
Listen,
there's a lot of.
I saw a video. Go ahead, Stanley.
Go ahead, Wayne.
I saw a video of a guy in Detroit who paid child support to a woman for 18 years, only to run DNA and find out the child was not his.
Yep.
And they still told him, after they found out the child was not his, that he still had to continue to pay and support her.
$33,000.
and she did not go to jail for putting his name on the birth certificate without his knowledge.
Paternity fraud.
Crazy.
Yep.
One of the top 10 things I would have to do if I was president of the United States.
There's a little more to that story. There's a little more to that story. So this guy, you're right. She put his name on a birth certificate, but because I believe she was applying for, I think, welfare or something like that. She had to identify who the baby's father was. This guy, yes. I think he knew her 18 years ago, but he had no contact with her and all the time. And apparently, they didn't have sex. I mean, he just knew who she was. She knew who he was. Figured, okay, he was a nice guy. Put his name down here. Then come to discover that, they did all the math. He owed $33,000. When they finally caught him to say, hey, by the way, you owe back child support for $33,000, he says, I don't have that kind of money. The judge said to him, if you do not fork over that money, you will go to jail. And he tried to fight it. He fought it. He lost. He actually lost his job and went to jail.
Mm-hmm.
He went to jail.
Yeah.
And and nobody gave a shit. Nobody gave a damn. And that's
no Kickstarter for him, nothing.
Nope.
Yeah.
Locked up.
So listen, this is a big deal. In the same way that, sexual assault, rape is a heinous crime. Mm-hmm. And someone goes to jail for 4 or 5 years because you lied on them and DNA proves it wasn't them, that whatever time they served, you should serve.
Absolutely. If you lie about that, you should serve the time. And we can. This is a whole other conversation we can get into, man. Believe me.
Yes.
Yes.
My smile.
Let's put this one on the table. We'll get back to this one because this is a good one. Okay, guys, we've been on here for quite some time. I think it's about time we wrap it up. But let me go around the table one more time to see if there's anything missed that you guys want to talk about. You can plug whatever you want to plug. Bennett Keller, I'll start with you, man.
This has been fantastic, guys. We got to do this on. Obviously, we're going to do this again, I hope.
Yes.
And no one really to plug right now except for, I don't know if anybody's watching this, but we got to plug this group.
Yep. We have to come up with a name for this group. Like, what are we going to call it? I don't know. We can think something up offline.
BB Inc. Ball Brothers Inc.
So if anybody shows up to join the group,
that works. Angry black bald men. No. But it's been fantastic, and hopefully we continue this because I really like this outlet, and it's a great way to network with people and bring more people in. So that's about it for me.
Thank you, sir. Stanley Paul.
Well, guys, nothing really to plug, but I have to say this. I have to exactly jump on that bandwagon because we need to plug this.
Oh, yeah.
Advertise it. Get a few more other brothers involved.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something Wayne could attest to. I've always telling Wayne, dude, I love to go to Toronto just to sit and talk to Wayne because I come back refreshed.
Uh-huh.
And talking with you brothers now, I'm even getting that even more so without having to leave Ottawa. So
that's exactly why I love Google Hangouts. This conversation. Yes. Yeah. All right. Thanks, man. Mr. Harris.
All right.
Well, first of all, Mr. Best, thanks for coming up with the concept and bringing us all together. It started off with Facebook messages about certain things and sharing videos and concepts that we learn to enrich ourselves, and then you brought us together in this forum, and I'm grateful and I'm thankful that it's here, and I will participate early and often every time because I think that our voices need to be heard, and I think other people have the same challenges in their territories and maybe need an outlet, and if we could provide that, why not do so for them? So thanks again for putting it together. Bennett and Stanley for hanging out. It's been awesome. I love it.
Yes, thanks, guys. I mean, this could not have happened without you guys. I'm very excited about this as well. I like the fact that we can have a conversation, to your point, Wayne, using critical thinking and maybe challenge a point of view without taking it personally, because it's just interesting to tease some of this stuff out. So this is a great venue for that. I'm excited about it. And I'm looking forward to our next one. I'm not sure if this time slot works for you guys. It works well for me. If it does for you, that's great. We can do that again next week. If you have anything that you do want to plug, you can send me offline. I'll put it in the low bar. And I will post this on Facebook, Twitter. You guys can feel free to go ahead and post yourselves. If we get any feedback for ideas of another discussion topic, I'm more than happy to take a look at it. We can decide between the four of us which topic we want to tackle next. But I think we have a nugget here that we can look at. So, all right, guys. Thanks, guys. It's always fun talking to you guys. We'll talk to you guys again soon. Bye for now.
Enjoyed the show? Like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for joining us in the Man Cave.